Well, a very good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Adrian Reed, and a very, very warm welcome to this evening's BA Community webinar. Now, I suspect many of us right now are working in a bit of a virtual world, whether you are working from home and connecting via Zoom or MS Teams and Slack and all the other tools that we use, or maybe even if you're temporarily at the office and communicating with others who aren't immediately where you are, or even if you are perhaps back in the office but communicating with people in other offices. We live in a world, COVID or no COVID, where we need to get to know people without necessarily meeting them in person. And we might meet them face-to-face over video, which is another interesting element, that face-to-face doesn't have to be in person. But we're almost certainly all learning and evolving, thinking about new ways of meeting people and building those relationships that are really so very, very important. So I'm really pleased, I'm really thrilled to say that today we have with us Kristy Dean. And I was really interested when I saw Kristy is speaking at the BA Conference Europe 2020 on a similar type of topic. And the name of your topic escapes me, Kristy, but it was something about making a relationship across the virtual interface or something like that. And that title correct. Really grabbed me because we're so often doing that. So before we get started, just a little bit about Kristy. Kristy has worked with cross-functional and global teams for companies such as Kodak and BT. She's worked for a digital startup, but is really, really enthusiastic about business analysis related topics, and just really, really sort of enthusiastic about the topics we're going to talk about today, and also describes herself as a lifelong learner, which is something that really resonates with me as well, Kristy. So Kristy, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Adrian. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. So if you are tuning in live, a few things before we get started. So Kristy and I will be chatting about our topic. So the topic today is small talk, big value, building great working relationships in a virtual world. But you actually, if you're tuning in live, you have two ways of interacting. So please do ask questions as we go through. You can click on the little Q&A icon and ask any questions, and we'll cover as many as we can. And feel free to type your questions, comments in there as well. And also shortly, and those of you that have been on a webinar before here will be familiar with this, I've created a Jamboard. So this is, if you've not come across these before, it's a Google product. And as we go through, you can actually add, like if you've got a particular, if Kristy makes a particular point, you think, oh, that's a good point, you can note the point down, and we'll sort of collectively take notes as we go through. So then we've all got something to take away, a little summary as well. So in just a few seconds, I'm going to pop that in the chat. So bear with me, folks, while I just pop that Jamboard link in the chat. So everyone who is attending, you should be able to see that now, and you can go on and add things as we go through. Fantastic. So, okay. So, Kristy, I suppose one question that people have is, well, first off, what are the challenges? Because if we can't meet our stakeholders at all, if they're, behind screens or behind webcams or whatever, what kind of challenges would you say that brings for us?
I think it brings in that the distancing, and not just the physical distancing, but the emotional distancing of connection. If we flip it around and think about the world in which we were in prior to lockdown, and many of us were office based, seeing people day in, day out, and there was lots of time for the random small snippets of conversation. You go and get a cup of tea, you go and just have a stretch your legs around the office, and there was somebody to interact with, just smile at as you're walking around the office. You break the day up. And when that you're working in a virtual world, clearly those opportunities are taken away. Even the bit when you're transitioning from meeting room to meeting room, if you're going to physically meet a group of people, then there's the pre-workshop settling in phase, where you're sorting out things that ready to facilitate, and also checking that everybody's in the room, etc. So when you take away those, you're left with the virtual interactions, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't achieve some form of connective working relationship.
Yeah, that's really interesting. As you were speaking there, Kristy, I was thinking that those moments that have been taken away from us in one way are those serendipitous moments where you just meet someone in the corridor or at the water cooler, or you'd get to a meeting early and someone else would be there early and you'd have a chat. And I don't know about you, but I'm finding it's becoming quite common practice to just book things back to back because you can, but that doesn't leave much mental processing space, and certainly no networking space, does it?
No, you're absolutely right, Adrian. We think it's just so simple to be able to click, disconnect and reconnect from the phone call or the video call. And we used to have back-to-back meetings. That's not a new thing, I don't suppose, in our lives. But it's that transition period, isn't it? You don't really get the interactions because there's no transition period. You might kind of end a call with some colleagues and pop up on a call with the same ones and be like, haha, I beat you there, sort of thing. But it's going from back to back and missing out
on the sort of human nature. So how can we overcome? So some of the, if we take that we're sort of, at the moment at least, this is the world we're in. How can we overcome some of those challenges where there aren't those serendipitous opportunities to meet people, and maybe we are working back to back? How can we overcome some of those challenges?
I think it's weaving time into those calls. It's very tempting, isn't it, when you're busy and you're going from one to the next, to just get straight down to business, straight into the next topic of conversation. But there's nothing stopping people from just a quick, oh, hi, haven't seen you in a while, how are you? And or perhaps one of the cool things I've noticed with Teams is if somebody starts a meeting a few minutes early, there's a little notification that pops up in the bottom corner. So you can choose to join if you are available a couple of minutes earlier. So your meeting's at 1:15, they start it at 12 minutes past. Just hop on, create the space, rather than waiting for something magical to happen.
I really like that idea of creating the space. It's interesting, isn't it? I'm now wondering, well, actually, like if we're running a workshop, with that idea of creating the space for these creating the space for these human interactions, maybe I'm thinking, well, if it's a meeting, maybe we should actually have 15 minutes. Like, if you want to arrive early, let's have virtual coffee for 15 minutes, but then we're going to start on time. We're going to start bang on time, but you've got 15 minutes of small talk, or beforehand. Have you ever tried anything like that, Kristy?
I think we've had sort of team coffee times virtually to keep connected with other fellow we're called solution designers in BT. For our chapter, we've got a couple of meetings in a week just to get together to see how things are going, and it's a purely no work call.
That's
so
hard
that
to maintain, isn't it?
it can be. We've found several games and tools to keep us occupied. The online Pictionary is a firm favourite in our little development team might work with.
I've not come across. Is that a website, or do you just play it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's an actual virtual Pictionary site. I'll pop it in the chat later on when I find the website.
That sounds fantastic.
But yeah, it's about, as you say, it's about creating spaces. And I think in our talking about workshops and things like that, there's a lot more planning to be done when you are doing things remotely. You might have to then just double check with your participants. Can they access the tool? Are they comfortable? If you're asking them to interact on like a Jamboard, for example, do they know how to do that? So it's probably worthwhile creating the space beforehand, just to say, come along, we'll have a cup of tea, coffee, we'll get familiar with the technology, and then we can start on time and stick to the agenda. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've got our first questions rolling in. So Nefra asks, well, it's sort of an observation with a question. In relation to transitioning, I find that the physical movement between rooms, etc., also gives me time and space for one thing to end and be left behind and for another one to begin. That's so true. I miss that in the virtual world, both physically and mentally in terms of energy. Have you any thoughts on how to create the same energy without physical movement? Or are there ways to incorporate physical movement with better or different technology? Wow. Big question.
Good question, Nifra. Wow. Yeah, I guess there's things you could do physically, the whole stand up, walk away from your wherever you're set up. I'm at the kitchen table right now. See, they've got the window behind me, and I can see their kitchen and the mess that is in there right now. But it's taking a step outside the room that you're working from at home. I mean, do feel very fortunate that I actually have a workspace at a proper table, and then there's the colleagues that they've got their laptops on their lap on the sofa. But still, I think to create the space of the physical transition between meeting rooms, get up and walk around would be my first thing.
It's interesting. I think it is interesting, isn't it? And I think I agree with Nefra a lot about that. There isn't the same separation. There isn't even the same separation between work and home, which is it's a different topic. But one thing, a good sort of friend and colleague of mine, Christina Lovelock, mentioned, and I've started to really take to heart, is if you've got a regular phone call, go for a walk, have a walking phone call meeting. And initially when she said it, I was like, what? I was like, oh, okay. Actually it gets you up, it gets, sort of like the back moving, the lower back. So building that movement in is another element. So good. Okay. So our next question comes from Michelle. And Michelle asks, how do you cope with meetings where all the attendees immediately put themselves on mute when they join? This suggests that they don't want to chit-chat. And I'll springboard from Michelle's very well observed point to say, what if you've got a bunch of folks who maybe don't even like to turn their camera on? Any thoughts on that?
I would say perseverance. It's not easy. I think we've all been thrown into it. If you're not used to the interactions in the virtual space, it certainly takes some time to get comfortable with it. The same with this topic of small talk. It's not natural for some to kind of start just a spontaneous conversation with another person. But for those that join, immediately go onto mute, no cameras, there are a few members of my we call it development squads that do the same thing, but it's noticing when they do come off mute and bringing them into the conversation. That where I worked before BT at RMS Automotive, with a guideline of no video, no call. So if you were, so that really kind of pushed the boundary of, okay, so I'd not been used to using video calling before, but we had offshore teams, and they had their cameras on, so it only felt right to kind of repay that view and just say, I can see you, so you should be able to see me. And it did feel really weird and quite uncomfortable to begin with, but you kind of get used to ignoring the thumbnail that's in the corner, or you minimize your own thumbnail just to, if you do feel that way. I wouldn't ever say, you must, if you're joining this call, you must have your camera on, because there are so many technology reasons why people might not, at the same time as a reticence to share. But it's persevere. It's being kind, being gentle, maybe check in with them after the meeting just to say, was there a particular reason why you didn't? And also, if people are joining a call and they're on mute, do they have to be in that meeting? Are they actively contributing?
Yeah.
is it necessary for them to be there?
And that's another really good point, isn't it? Is actually, are some people sort of loafing, like meeting? I don't know if that's probably not a term, but meeting loafing, where they don't necessarily need to be there, but don't necessarily feel empowered to question it or to. So that's an interesting angle as well. So okay, so I love that idea of perseverance and being kind and catching up with them to find out the reasons. So we've got.
Yeah.
We've got lots of questions coming in. Before we move on to those, I just want to segue into a slightly different topic, because we've got the sort of whole session uses the term small talk, big value. What do we mean by small talk, and why is it so important?
So small talks are those, little interactions that you have on a day-to-day basis that you can create space for in the virtual world, whether that be verbal small talk or written small talk in some form of instant messaging. It's a way of showing that you are a human being and not a job title, and it's a way of recognizing your stakeholders are in a similar situation, and with the benefit of having more of a connection rather than a purely worky professional, because I think the world is changing. The working world is so very different to how it was.
Yeah.
Management styles are changing. The way we interact with each other, the social media platforms. We're sharing things on LinkedIn, for example, that work achievements, etc., or things like this, which are very exciting to do. So it's fine. The small talk is making things more human, and there's got to be a level of vulnerability on your side, because you're not always going to get it right, same with anything else.
Yeah.
But it's being curious. We BAs, we ask so many open-ended questions in our day-to-day. Bring that into your more interpersonal relationships.
That's interesting, that curiosity and the humanness, and it brings. I'm sort of in my mind connecting it with what you said previously, Kristy, about being kind and empathetic and understanding the person. I guess it's about having that human connection that transcends the work. It's about actually being curious about the person that sits beneath as you say, beneath the job title.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it's, as BAs, we've got so many different skills in our toolbox that actually the core skills, not soft skills, the core skills of being able to connect and get, creating a safe space for someone to talk with you about, the general gist of the weather. It's always an easy one to go with if you're feeling nervous, because I think this is sometimes there's a bit of we hold back because there's so many topics that we not suitable for work, or potentially we don't want to offend by going off topic. We don't wish to I can't think of the other word I thought of earlier, but it's that whole thing of we don't want to fail. I did it just this very week. I failed with one of my squad members, not too dramatically, but the news on the news about Belarus and the situation that was happening there. I checked in with Stanislav in our squad, and I just said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I've seen things on the news. Are you okay?" And he went, "I live in the Ukraine." I was like, "Oh,
oops.
Okay then, great. Well, I'm glad that you're safe and everything is well." And these things happen, and you stumble your way through life, and it's not. Don't be afraid to appear human when you fail as well. In that interaction, we had a bit of a little instant message chat afterwards, and it's totally fine. It's just being real.
Yeah, being real, and as you say, taking the risk, like showing the interest, because people are actually quite understanding. So, okay, so let's cover some more questions. So Luke asks, how do you manage your well-being during this time? Does your company support it? And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that, I suppose, to some extent, has a connection with that human and empathy, and we're shuffling from meeting to meeting, back to back. Do you see a connection with well-being?
I think well-being is a very important part of your work life. We've done a lot within BT, within consumer digital. We've got something called DigiLife, and within that, different guilds that look after different elements. And if it's the Luke I'm thinking of, Luke and I are actually members of the Wellbeing Guild, and we've done so much to open up the communication channels with people. You know, we're now receiving feedback of the actions that we've taken are making people feel more comfortable at work. So as an example of things that we've done during lockdown is we love a hashtag, so we've gone with let's stay connected.
Yeah.
So on the workplace platform, hashtag let's stay connected, people are posting, you know, what it's like working from home in those environments. We've done post packages, take your time pack that had a Yorkshire tea bag, a Kit Kat, and some sunflower seeds.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah. and just a slip of paper in there with an opportunity to write down things that you feel grateful for, to turn the positive, keep that positive view on things. And it's yeah, we're now moving into each week we're releasing like a mini interview video about topics. We've called it This Could Be Awkward.
Okay.
So things that we won't talk about. So there's always 3 people in the conversation, a facilitator and 2 people. We've done anxiety, depression. We're about to release caring for loved ones. You know, and it's, people have kind of said everybody has something that they're happening within their lives, but within the working environment we don't always feel comfortable talking about it. So our aim is to create that space for people to feel as though they can.
That's really interesting, Kristy, because I'm thinking in my head here that this is sort of linked to small talk, I think, because like like when like because there are different ways of asking how are you, aren't there? There's the how are you, which means I just want you to say yeah, fine, you, and then there's the how are you when I'm actually asking no, really, how are you? And it's interesting because it brings back that sort of human side. So wow, it's great that you and your organization doing so much around well-being. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we have a phrase of, if we can help one person through the things that we do, then we've done our job. And with the how are you question, it's listening. So the small talk element is there, but it's certainly the listening impact. So if someone gives you the oh yeah, I'm fine, you ask again and you go, no, really, how actually are you? Because I can tell.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm really fortunate, and I have friends and people I sort of collaborate with who I've known for years, and they are very honest with me. I had a text message from someone recently who sent me a text saying, "Is it possible you're working a little bit too long or too hard?" Right, and I was like, "How does she know that?" And I was like, okay, it's because I sent her an email at this time in the evening and this time in the morning, which was largely because my sleep patterns are weird. That's a whole different topic. But I was like, oh wow, that's such a thoughtful thing to do, because it's really easy. And I did look at it and think, you're right, actually. And I needed someone to prod me and say, why are you responding to things at 4:30 in the morning? That's insane, type of thing. Insomnia, it's no fun. But yeah, so we can look after each other in that way. Okay, so our next question comes from Edna, and this is, if anyone has a solution for this one, I would love it. Edna says, I find it difficult to look into the camera when I'm speaking and to look for reactions from others in the meeting as well. And I'd springboard from what Edna's saying there, because like at the moment I'm coordinating, Q&A and all sorts of different documents on the screen. Would love some tips on best practice, how to maintain eye contact whilst also looking for non-verbal cues from the listener. Any tips?
Oh, I think it becomes challenging when you're screen sharing on any kind of like interactive platform, because that takes up the majority of your screen.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about Teams is you can share a screen and then go back to the Teams window and still see all the participants in their tiles, which is quite handy. It's probably available on other platforms as well. But if you think about when you're in that physical space, you're multitasking and trying to do a lot of things all at the same time as well. So first thing, Edna, I would say is take the pressure off yourself to be, perfect facilitation in this arena or in this ways of working, because I think the more pressure you put on yourself, the more anxious you can become about the situation. Then it can go kind of awry. So non-verbal cues, look for if they've not got their camera on, people coming off mute. That's a kind of a key one, because you can see on participants lists, even depending on how sensitive their microphones are, etc. But you get an indication of when somebody is available to talk, so you can see who's on mute and not on mute, and who was kind of pressed the button and gone because they want to.
That's interesting, because bringing in another question that Bal asks. Bal says, due to bandwidth, videos aren't always on. How do you gauge people's understanding on the phone without being able to see their faces? And that vocal tone can say quite a lot, can't it? And pauses, and the yes that means no. Like we've all heard the yes that means no. The begrudging yes.
Yes, indeed. And it's interesting what you were just saying about the tone of voice. So there's people that the mirroring of body language. You lean forward in a meeting, they lean forward in a meeting. You can do something similar with your tone of voice. With the cadence and how quickly you're speaking to your participants or with them, and then also the pitch. How I tend, if I'm getting quite excited and passionate in a conversation, I'll notice that my pitch will raise, and things will come out faster and tumble, and I know that could be a bit overwhelming. So it's taking that step back and mirroring and keeping it calm. On the reverse of that, I think at some point we're probably going to touch on like conflict in the remote situation. So by implementing some form of small talk and becoming human to the other person, you kind of have an acceptance within yourself of, I appreciate that person is not happy right now, but I know that they're not happy with me personally, because we can talk about our pets or something like that. So it's the removal of that potential.
That sort of barrier to conversation in a way.
Yeah, definitely. So just monitor, be aware of the speed and of the tone. And if somebody is slightly more agitated, try not to mirror in that situation and bring it back down.
Otherwise it sort of escalates, doesn't it? But it's interesting, the eye contact one, and this is one I really struggle with on on these webinars and on other, because often the webcam is at a different level to the screen. I mean, one trick that I've not ever been able to do this, but one trick I've seen people do is actually have printouts of people's faces by the webcam. Stick up pictures of people's faces, which I've not tried, but it could be an interesting one, because then it's almost like you're, rather than speaking to a wall, you're speaking to some photos of your colleagues or whatever. But
well, I think, Adrian, it adds into that. If there's technological challenges around bandwidth, maybe come to some form of an agreement that you'll put a profile picture on instead. So you're not just talking to some initials. That helps with a little bit more of a connection and reminding that there's a person sitting behind the screen on the other end. So
definitely. So we'll take some more questions in a moment, but I just want to segue into a topic you mentioned there, Kristy, which was conflict and disagreement, because we all know, I'm sure, how tricky that can be in the real world when you've got 7 people around a table and they all, well, I guess the worst is they agree, but then it's like the meetings never happen because they haven't actually agreed because we've misread them. So, I mean, is it harder to tell when there's conflict in a real world, in a virtual world? And what would your tips be for dealing with conflict amongst stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that it's tricky. I'm not going to say it's easier by any stretch. It's probably, I would say, a little bit harder, especially if you are not able to have the interaction by a camera. But it's, I would say, a little bit more about exercising your empathy, doing the active listening, keeping a track of where your stakeholders are at, and if you can, nip it off before it gets to the point where it's escalating.
Yeah,
Admittedly, if you're in a discussion and an open call and something comes up and it becomes quite tense, then as long as it's that kind of as a team, there's a team with the stakeholders and the business in there, and then yourselves as BAs, if you've got a project manager with you, if you've got kind of like what you're looking to achieve from a deliverables perspective, and if it's a marriage up between that, make use of strength in numbers.
yeah,
I've certainly been on calls where for example, as a project team, we've been speaking to our customer team via video software, Skype, I think it was. But from our side, we've kind of got a side chat going with the project team of, so and so, maybe we should. And it's being present in the meeting because you're actively listening to what's going on, but it's also making sure that because you're not physically sitting next to somebody, that you're still aligned with them.
yeah, yeah, and that can be quite valuable, can't it? To just be able to ping across a quick message saying, "Oh, I'm not quite sure that person's on board. Do we just need to go around that loop again? Am I?"
Yeah.
So you can kind of, as you say, strengthen numbers. And I mean, on that note, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you think about conflict. Well, certainly when I think about conflict, I also think about office politics.
Oh,
And well, if there's no office, does that mean there's no office politics? I mean, I know the answer to that, but what about politics? Office politics in a virtual world?
yeah, challenging. There's no two ways about it. Politics are there whether you like them or not. I've tried the various different tactics. Do the ignore,
Yeah,
do the I'm going in with this camp and see what happens. It's so tricky, even when you are in person. Again, one of the benefits I would say from a remote environment is you can choose to be a bit more removed if you wish. I'd say make use of the hierarchy and the escalation points. We are all there to do the job and to fulfill the deliverables of whatever project we're working on. So
yeah,
you're not alone. You might be physically alone in your location, but you're not alone.
yeah,
And that small talky bit, it would help with those connection building. It all comes back to connection, that building rapport, that feeling you can contact somebody if you're in need of some support. Yeah,
definitely.
politics. Yeah.
Tricky one. That could be a whole nother webinar, really.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, well, we're about halfway through, so this is the terrifying moment where I will share the Jamboard and see what people have been putting. So I've not pre-read any of these. So there's lots on there. That's fantastic. So we've got no video, no call. So that's one approach. We miss smiling at the colleagues randomly. Yeah. So and someone's put smile if you have no camera, it will be heard in your voice. I've heard that before. That even if you've just got a regular phone call, people can hear whether you're smiling. So
Yeah.
it comes across in the vocal, I guess, the vocal tone. Create space for virtual coffee. Politics are there. A lot about creating the space. Dealing with conflict in a virtual world is about exercising your empathy and active listening. Nip it off. a lot about well-being. Be real. I like that. Whoever's put that one, that's a good one as well. So great. Okay, so if anyone's joined late, you might not currently have the link to the Jamboard, so I'm just going to pop it in the chat as well. And feel free to add your comments as we go along there. So we've got a sort of group collective note-taking at the very end. Okay, so we'll take some more questions now. So our next question comes from Anna. And Anna says, I've joined a company during lockdown. We're all working from home and I haven't met any of my colleagues in person. I introduce myself and switch on my camera when I meet new colleagues, but I find that people who already work there are too busy with their workload and just can't make time for small talk and don't like to switch their videos on even when I ask them. Therefore, I'm finding it hard to build rapport. Any suggestions for this scenario?
Yeah, Anna, well, congratulations for your new role during this time. It's not going to be easy to be onboarded in a remote environment. I think it comes back to the perseverance. Can you break it down into one-to-one interactions? You know, can you arrange, you know, a 15-minute call with somebody just to say, oh, you know, not saying that the pretext of can you help me with something, but there must be opportunities that you're going through in the early stages of your new being with your new employer, where you know you need access to something, or you need to find some files, etc. Try having those interactions more by call. If you don't have a buddy, see if there's somebody in your team that you can buddy up with, and if you, I genuinely believe if you keep on with showing your face on the calls, then you know at some point you can casually bring it up. You know, don't make a big thing out of it, like I always have my camera on. Just be a bit gentle. Say, you know, oh, it's a bit strange, isn't it, kind of coming into a new company, and I appreciate, you know, you've all met each other before. You know, it'd be great if I could, you know, if we could have a bit of a video chat and sound the other person out, rather than don't worry too much about it. You know, when you enter a new company, you're kind of filled with those anxieties of, oh, it's new, I want to do my best, I want to prove that they've hired the right person, and those kinds of things. So along with that, see if you can buddy up, and best luck, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So sort of small, subtle, you know,
Yeah.
and going on that sort of one-on-one approach, I can see being really quite effective, and getting to know individuals. Yeah, definitely good luck with that one, Anna. It's a challenging time, I think, to be on, as Kristy said, to be onboarding. So okay, so our next question comes from Luke, and Luke says, do you think emotional intelligence comes into play when trying to survive small talk?
Yes. You probably want more of an answer than that. I would say, you know, we could have a whole nother conversation on emotional intelligence. I love the subject. It's around awareness of self and awareness of others, and also the active listening and the being curious is a way of exercising your empathy. Yeah, I think it's there's a lot that we could cover off on this topic.
It's so interesting, and because it's funny, because my mind immediately went to self-awareness, and also, I think one thing I've learned, and I'd be really interested if anyone else has found this, that, like, I know there's the sort of expression that we all wear a bit of a mask at work, and we all, you know, and like I've probably mentioned this before, but it's sort of interesting, isn't it, that I was wearing a suit and tie every day, and I'm not, and we're more than the person. I think one of the things that lockdowns taught me is, like, you know, almost like you can be more of your authentic self and no one cares. And actually, that's probably a good thing. I don't know whether you've found similar with your colleagues and your experience, Kristy.
Yeah, it's totally true, Adrian. I think because it's a very unique situation. We're all experiencing the same thing at the same time, but in our own individual way. No two persons' experience of this will be the same. So, you know, the environment that you're in at home, you as an individual would assume be you comfortable in. So things start to creep in whether you like it or not. I mean, a cat's not made an appearance yet, but that's not guaranteed it won't happen before the end of the webinar. You know, it's my husband's just come in and got a glass of water out of the fridge. All those sorts of things happen, and I think from a sense of work persona versus home persona, they're merging
They are
so
blurring.
much at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing. As I said before, the way that we work is changing, and you know, wouldn't it be lovely if when we as did start going back into the office and meeting people again face to face, that we could maintain some of that openness?
Yeah, yeah. And because I was thinking, I don't know whether you saw it, and this will probably only make sense to anyone who's connected, who's from the UK. There was this hilarious BBC News video about a year or two ago where there was someone being interviewed on the BBC, and his kid came in a baby walker in the background, and then someone came to retrieve it. And this was like, you know, and finally, look at this hilarious thing that's happened. Now it's just like, yeah, and like, who
It's
cares?
life.
Like, yeah, he's a father, so what? You know, lots of people are. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Just on that one.
yeah,
Sorry, Adrian.
go ahead.
We've done a couple of a few wellbeing drop-ins. So again, these are like creating spaces for people just to come and talk about whatever is on their mind. And if we've had a few people kind of say, well, I feel as though my work persona is disappearing, and I can be more myself, and I can share more openly. So yeah, I think that there's so many positives to be found in the situation that we're in, even though it's awful. That we should hang on to those and try and take them forward with us, rather than being, oh well, I'm back in the office now, I must be suited and booted and, you know, shiny shoed.
Exactly. And the ability to partition work between other things, like, you know, and because, you know, actually the sort of office hours are meaningless if there is no office. So
Yeah.
so okay, so Simon says, not a question, but rather, this was going back to the how are you question. Rather than asking how are you, I like to ask my team, how's your day going so far, which I think is fantastic.
Brilliant.
That's a great tip that I'm going to take away straight away and use. We then have Tim. Tim says, this is such a relevant topic for these COVID times. We all need to get better at virtual meetings. I'd like to recommend Penny Pullen's virtual leadership book, which I read recently, would really complement the content covered in tonight's webinar. I would absolutely wholeheartedly endorse Tim's recommendation there. Penny's done a previous webinar, so if you go on our YouTube, a couple of years ago, Penny did that. And if you're an IIBA member, I'm pretty sure Penny Pullen's virtual leadership book is in the virtual library, so you can even, if you're an IIBA member, read it for free. But yeah, thank you, Tim, for that suggestion as well.
Making a note.
Yes, definitely. So then we have and I apologise. I'm almost certainly mispronouncing your name here. It's not one I'm familiar with. I think it's Christiana or Christiana. A comment from Belgium. Small talk is useful to find out things that are relevant to the project, but we haven't been told. So, for example, the other department is building similar software application to ours. Oh, yes. I don't know why I'm on this project. I am opposed to this project. Great. I mean, it's so true, isn't it? It's those water cooler moments, and definitely. And then Michelle asks, and I think this is probably around the sort of conflict element or getting people to open up a little bit more. If you are joining a meeting where others have already joined, do you tend to speak to one specific person or address your comments or questions to the group? Interesting.
In the scenario where if I was late to a call for whatever reason and something was overrunning, I'd always try and find a way to message the chairperson or whatever had arranged it just to say, I'll be along in a minute, apologies. And then it's when you're ready to contribute to that call, I'd just direct the question, the comment to whomever you want to direct it towards. But I would just say, in this instance, apologies everybody, I was late, but here's my question too, and then carry on. These things do happen, technical difficulties, microphone stops working, you can't hear anything when you dial in. But yeah, just treat it as if you always direct your questions as you would in the physical world, because you're going to get the best answer to your question, I reckon.
Absolutely. And as you say, those things do happen. Even the best prepared, you can have, well, before we started, I was sharing so the reason I now have a new, in fact, if you've seen webinars with me before, I've normally got quite a tall glass. I now have a mug with a lid because twice I spilt lots of water over my desk, including almost a pint of water, which I was watching going down the electrical socket during a meeting, which is not a good look, as I had to frantically try and make sure that that nothing bad happened. But the house is on an RCD, so I did know it wouldn't kill me, which is a residual current device. I remember that from GCSE physics. So there we go. So Richard has a comment. Richard says, I work with not-for-profits, and this may be a useful resource around this topic. It's a framework for human connection. And what I'll do is I'll put this in the chat after I've read it out. It has been curated and created by a digital agency funded by an organisation called The Catalyst, which is funded by Nesta and others. It's for not-for-profits working with their service users, but is more generally applicable to any work or collaboration situation. They've created a framework with a set of conditions to be achieved and principles, and within this have identified between 30 to 40 methods, wow, a bit like liberating structures. It's been tested on a number of case studies, and further details can be found here. So I'm just going to type the URL that Richard has kindly popped in the Q&A into the chat, because it won't let me paste it, unfortunately. And it is a framework for human connection. So thank you very much for that, Richard. I've not come across that. I've heard of liberating structures, but I've not come across that framework. So and Richard's added, P.S. the above all relates to working virtually. So great. That's a interesting resource for us all to click through to.
Perfect.
Excellent. Oh, and Anna says thank you for the advice. So she's happy, which is great. Okay, so I just want to segue before we start to close about virtual facilitation, because as well as dealing with conflict, as well as dealing with getting to know people, we're probably all more facilitating in a virtual environment. It's quite different, isn't it? Because, we're probably used to our sticky notes and our Sharpie markers. So what do you see as the challenges in virtual facilitation? What sort of tips do you have?
Finding an appropriate tool, that you could use, like the Jamboard. We're using Myro currently at work. Finding an online collaboration space is beneficial, because you still want to be able to have that sticky note and pen type feel. But also, I'd consider how you break that workshop up. We've already touched on preparing the audience for what to expect, but also in terms of break times, letting people know how long there is left in a segment. When you're in an all-day workshop physically, you're going to get the actual signals of shuffling around in the chair and looking at the watch and those sorts of things. So I'd say just be conscious and plan those things in on the virtual world as well. Just because you're sitting comfortably looking at a screen doesn't mean to say that you don't need to go and get a glass of water, for example. So there's those things. In regards to facilitation, if some ground rules around talking over each other. There's a lot of things that translate into the virtual world, that you all have the skills to do. It's giving them a try. Yeah, I think if you can break things into smaller groups as possible, that helps. But then also, obviously, you've got that challenge of making sure you capture everybody's view. So I think things might take a slightly longer, but
Yeah,
it'd be worth
I
the
agree.
effort.
I found that too. But I think I mean, just to springboard from what you're saying, I think one thing, and the breaking into small chunks is important, but also, I mean, this sounds like such a ridiculous thing to say, but like planning in breaks, because you know, and I don't know if anyone else has been doing this, but one thing I've been trying to do is if something, you know, if there's a slot which is say 60 minutes, 2 hours, whatever, I've been trying to plan to finish 5 or 10 minutes early on the basis that probably everyone's back to back, and 5 minutes gives people a chance to you know, to
Yes.
grab a coffee, and everyone thanks you for that. So so Richard asks, how do you find and I can never pronounce this, is it Myro? So Myro, strengths and weaknesses. Have you enjoyed using Myro?
Yeah, it took a little bit of getting used to, like with any new tool. The most annoying thing I've found with it is not being able to select something. So, you know, you've got your frames and your sticky post-its and all the rest of it. And when you first log in back into a board, you know, your cursor's on the natural selection, defaulted to the selector, but it takes me at least 5 or 6 clicks to actually get to be able to edit something on a sticky note, because for whatever reason, I just haven't found the right way of clicking to get that to work. But yeah, in terms of the shortcut keys and things like that, it's useful. But when you're flicking from virtual tool to virtual tool, it's remembering that the scroll bar actually has a different function depending on which one you're in. So we use Figma for designs, and in there the scroll bar literally moves the screen up and down, but when you're in Miro or Myro, you can set your scroll bar to zoom in and out. So
Yeah.
it's just the way you are. But frames are really useful in Miro. If you want to work on a particular section, put it in a frame, and then you can navigate between frames from one of the toolbars. So you don't always have to like scroll back in and out to find it.
Fantastic. Top tips there, and I mean other tools as well. I know a lot of people are using the phonetically similar Mural instead of Miro, Myro, however they're pronounced. So yeah, so lots of tools out there. So okay, well we're very nearly out of time, and there's so much more that we could cover. But if there was one biggest piece of advice or one biggest takeaway for people who are listening in, what would that be, Kristy?
I've given this a good old think because it's quite drawing to an end. I would say try it and find a way that you're comfortable with. As with most things in life, people can get a sense of your personal comfort level and your authenticity, shall we say. If you are genuinely interested in another person and how they are, the other person is going to know, and they're going to pick up on that. When that can only be a good thing about what we're saying about be gentle and be kind. So, but be kind to yourself. So find a way of having the small talk that you feel comfortable with, whether it's via video, just simply picking up the phone, instant message, whatever works for you, but keep that genuine interest there. And good luck.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sort of be curious, be kind, be connected.
Yeah. Let's stay connected.
Connected, yeah. The hashtag has seen its way through. Well, Kristy, thank you so much. People, I am sure, are going to want to stay in touch with you, to follow you, and keep in touch with what you do. How's the best way for people to stay in touch? Would that be LinkedIn or Twitter or?
I'd say LinkedIn's probably the most appropriate. I'm making a very slow progress into Twitter, but yeah, LinkedIn's the main contact point. So yeah, feel free to get in touch on there. And if anyone's got any questions afterwards, please do get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, I'll pop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the wrap-up email so people can click right through and can connect with you. So, Kristy, thank you so much for taking time out to have this conversation this evening. I know it's such a relevant topic for so many of us, and by the number of people that registered, I just know it's a topic that has really resonated. So, thank you so much for taking the time out. As a reminder to anyone listening in, Kristy is speaking at the BA Conference Europe 2020, so do check that out as well. It's virtual, it's online, so you can attend from wherever you are in the world and hear a whole bunch of fantastic sessions there as well. The only other thing left for me to say, as well as thanking Kristy, is of course to say thank you to everyone who has tuned in live. This session was being recorded, so if you've missed bits of it, I will get the recording edited and up by tomorrow morning. I also just wanted to let you know of a few other sessions that we have coming up, and I'm going to pop the links to these in the chat. The first is a session, oh no, that's the wrong link. All the best laid plans, and I managed to paste the wrong link, hang on. This link is a link to, it's actually tomorrow at 6:30 UK time. It's a, I had this crazy idea. It's a 1 hour event called the BA Fringe, and it's really about topics that are at the edges of what we practice as business analysis, as BAs. So think about disciplines that intersect or overlap, people we can learn stuff from, and perhaps who can exchange ideas from us. But that's actually going to be produced less like a webinar and more like a live TV show. And if my hair is receding a little bit further than it normally is, that's because it's taken a lot of technical coordination. So if you can make it, do come along, it'll be fun. The actual Zoom webinar element of it is full. But I've worked out that we can also simultaneously stream live to YouTube. So if you haven't signed up already, you won't be able to get a place in the Zoom room, but you can sign up and we'll ping you an email 15 minutes before we go live with the YouTube video. So come with me on that journey and we'll see how it goes, because it's fun and terrifying in equal measure. Also then in week or so's time, there's the BA Open Mic. So the second link there is the BA Open Mic. That's going to be a series of 3-minute presentations. It's not a webinar, it's in a regular Zoom room, so you'll be able to see everyone else. And that's a bit of a very different event, but you can come and speak. So if you've not spoken at an event before, come and have 3 minutes on the stage. Informal, fun. Imagine it's like a sort of virtual pub, a way of staying connected with our virtual peers in these difficult times. So all that is left for me to say is, once again, massive thank you, Kristy. Can't wait to see your session. Even more excited about your session at the conference now. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in. Enjoy the rest of your days and the rest of your day, and hope to see you all again somewhere very soon. But bye for now.
Thank you, Adrian. Bye.
Bye.